The interview lasted 45 minutes. Arnold sat in a television studio, lights bright, camera pointed at his face, answering questions about his approach to training, his philosophy on winning, his thoughts on the future of bodybuilding. It was 1979. Arnold was at his absolute peak. 7-time Mr. Olympia champion. Invincible. Legendary. The interviewer, a young journalist named David, asked a question that made Arnold pause. What if you failed? David asked, what if one day you stepped on stage and didn't win? What would that mean for you? Arnold thought about it, really thought about it, because it was a good question. It was the kind of question that made you dig deeper into who you actually were. Well, Arnold said, choosing his words carefully, if I failed, it would not destroy me, because I have learned that success is not about the result. Success is not about winning the trophy or standing at the top. Success, real success, it is about the attempt. It is about putting yourself on the stage, taking the risk, giving everything you have. Even if you fail, even if you do not win, the fact that you tried, that you challenged yourself, that you gave your best effort. This is where the real success is, in the effort, in the attempt. This is what I believe. David nodded. It was a thoughtful answer, a deep answer, an answer that revealed something about Arnold's philosophy. The interview ended. Arnold shook David's hand. They talked casually for a few minutes. Arnold felt good about the interview. It had been real, honest. He didn't think about it again. 2 days later, Arnold woke up to find his face on the front page of every major newspaper. The headline read, Arnold admits defeat. Champion says he could fail. Underneath, another headline, Schwarzenegger loses confidence. I am not sure I can win anymore. And in smaller print, legendary bodybuilder breaks down, reveals deep doubts about his future. Arnold read the articles in shock. They had taken his words about effort and attempt and reframed them as doubt. They had taken his philosophy about success being in the struggle and transformed it into an admission of weakness. One article quoted him as saying, I am afraid of losing. I do not know if I can win again. He had never said that, not even close. Another article had a headline, Schwarzenegger's confidence crumbles. Champion admits he may never win again. Again, not what he had said, not even close. But the damage was done. The story spread. Other newspapers picked it up. Television news covered it. Radio stations talked about it. Within hours, the narrative had become, Arnold Schwarzenegger was losing his confidence. The champion was breaking down. The invincible one was finally cracking. Social networks didn't exist yet, but gossip did. And the gossip spread through the bodybuilding community like a virus. Other competitors started talking, some sympathetically, some with barely concealed joy. I heard Arnold is doubting himself, one competitor said to another. Yeah, apparently he's scared of losing, another replied. Maybe his time is up. Maybe someone can beat him this year. The words traveled. They were repeated. They were embellished. By the time they had passed through 5 people, the original statement had become something completely different. Arnold was losing. Arnold was broken. Arnold was done. And none of it was true. Arnold decided to respond. He called the television station. He spoke to David, the interviewer. You misquoted me, Arnold said, trying to stay calm. You took what I said about effort and made it sound like doubt, like I don't believe in myself. David seemed genuinely confused. But that's what you said, David insisted. You said if you failed, success would be in the attempt, not the result. Yes, Arnold said. That is what I said. But that does not mean I am afraid of losing. That means I understand that winning is not everything, that the work, the effort, the attempt, these things I value even if the result is not what you want. Right, but the newspaper, David started. The newspaper twisted my words. Arnold said firmly. They made it sound like I am giving up, like I am accepting failure. That is not what I said. That is not what I meant. But the more Arnold tried to explain, the more the damage spread. Because every time he went on television to clarify, every time he gave an interview to explain what he really meant, it became another news cycle, another headline, another opportunity for people to misinterpret his words. Schwarzenegger doubles down on failure philosophy. One headline read after his first attempt to clarify. Champion insists he's not worried about losing, read another, which made it sound like he was protesting too much, which made it sound like he actually was worried. Arnold was trapped. He had said something that was true and honest and reflective, but in the process of defending it, of trying to clarify it, of attempting to correct the misinterpretation, he was only making things worse. Every word he said was being twisted. Every interview was being misrepresented. Every attempt to set the record straight was being repackaged as a new story. Arnold had lost control of his own narrative. For the first time in his career, he understood what it meant to be powerless. He had spent his entire life controlling things, controlling his body, controlling his image, controlling his destiny. But he couldn't control what people said about him. He couldn't control how his words were used. He couldn't control the narrative. He called his manager. "What do I do?" Arnold asked. "Stop talking," his manager said. "Stop giving interviews. Stop trying to clarify. Every word you say is being used against you. The more you speak, the worse it gets." Arnold didn't like that answer, because silence felt like acceptance. Silence felt like admitting that the misquote was true, but his manager was right. The more Arnold tried to explain, the more ammunition he was giving to the media. The more interviews he did, the more they could twist his words. So Arnold did something that was almost impossible for him. He stopped talking about it. He went to his training. He focused on his preparation. He let the storm rage around him while he worked in silence. The newspapers continued their narrative. The bodybuilding community continued to gossip. The competitors continued to suggest that Arnold was losing his edge. But Arnold didn't respond. He didn't explain. He didn't clarify. He just trained. And in the silence, something interesting happened. The story began to lose power. Without Arnold feeding it, without new interviews to twist, without fresh quotes to misrepresent, the narrative started to fade. People moved on to other stories, other controversies, other scandals. By the time Mr. Olympia competition came around 6 months later, the misquote had been almost completely forgotten. And Arnold showed up on stage and dominated completely. He won decisively. He proved through performance that all the talk about doubt and fear was completely baseless. But more importantly, he had learned something profound. He had learned that the only thing more dangerous than being misunderstood is trying to be understood. Because in defending the truth, in fighting against the misinterpretation, he had only amplified the false narrative. But in accepting that he couldn't control how people interpreted his words, in letting go of the need to be understood, he had regained his power. Years later, when Arnold would reflect on this moment, he would talk about what it taught him. "I realize that I cannot control what people say about me," Arnold said in an interview. "I cannot control how my words are used. I cannot control the narrative. And once I accepted that, once I stopped trying to fight it, once I let it go, I was free. Because the truth is not something that needs defending every single day. The truth is something that reveals itself through action, through work, through results." "So you let the misquote stand?" the interviewer asked. "I let it go," Arnold said. "Not the same thing, because a misquote is still just a thing people say. But the truth is in what I do. It is in how I train. It is in the victories I achieve. It is in the person I become. That cannot be misquoted. That cannot be twisted. That is real." The shocking revelation came years later, when David, the original interviewer, was asked about that interview. "I didn't intentionally misquote him," David said, "but I was young. I was ambitious. I wanted a bigger story. And when I looked at his words about effort and attempt being more important than the result, I saw an opportunity for a sensational headline. So I reframed it. I emphasized the failure part. I made it sound like doubt. And I did it because I want to create a more interesting narrative. I wasn't trying to harm Arnold. I was just trying to make a story that people would care about. It was a small confession, years after the fact, but it revealed the truth about how narratives get created and distorted. Arnold never responded to David's admission. He never said, "I told you so." He never used it as vindication, because by then, Arnold understood something that most people never learn. The power is not in being right. The power is not in proving that you were misquoted. The power is not in defending your reputation. The power is in letting go, in moving forward, in building your truth through action instead of defending it through words. That's what Arnold did after the Misquote incident. He didn't fight it. He didn't feed it. He didn't defend it. He just won. And in winning, he proved that all the talk about doubt and fear had been noise. Nothing more. The real Arnold, the one who existed beyond the headlines and the misquotes, was revealed through his performance. And that could never be twisted. That could never be misinterpreted. That could only be experienced. The misquoted words taught Arnold that the only narrative that matters is the one you write with your actions. Everything else is just noise. And the moment you stop listening to the noise, the moment you stop trying to correct it, the moment you accept that you cannot control how people interpret your words, you become truly unstoppable. Because your power is no longer dependent on what people say about you. Your power is dependent only on what you do. And what you do cannot be misquoted. What you do cannot be twisted. What you do is simply and completely true. That was the lesson of the misquoted words. And it was worth more than any headline could ever be.